All right, my name is Matiss. I'm a company builder in fintech and in consumer lending across different countries around the world, starting with businesses like Avafin that generates $150 million in annual revenue, businesses like a Jordanian consumer lender company, Money.jo, that has close to 200,000 customers, and a Skated loans marketplace with over 50 million in assets under management, and a bunch of other companies. And today I want to sell you my MLM marketing course for just $9.99. Just kidding. Jokes aside, I want to go back to the partnerships point. So it's interesting that there's one thing in common for all of those businesses that I mentioned and many of projects that I have started and I didn't even mention. And it's not that they're all successful. Clearly, the success rate is over 50%, ideally maybe 60% at most. But it's something else. And that is that all of those businesses I have started, scaled, brought to a meaningful size together with at least one or more business partners. And here by business partners, I don't mean just co-founders, even though that's a very important category. I mean just more generally, joint ventures and other things. So going back to the partnerships, there are different types of categories. I'll talk about that. And especially in the last couple of years, since me and my co-founder Davis, we have entered Jordan with consumer loans. We are now going into other countries in the Middle East. In the Middle East, you can do nothing without local partners. It's super difficult. So this topic is even more relevant for me than ever before. And that's why I'm actually in Dubai again. I did a video, I think in November last year. So I'm here again, but tomorrow having a lot of meetings in the conference, etc. And yeah, I'm here to structure a business partnership to try to enter the UAE market, which is otherwise very difficult to enter. But let me kind of summarize and categorize three topics I'll talk about in terms of partnerships for this video. Number one is I'll define what I mean by business partnerships to give a better scope for this discussion. Number two is I will talk about different lessons, takeaways, things that worked, things that haven't worked from my experience across different business partnerships, different countries, different markets, different business models over about 15-year time span. And number three, I will give a summary on empirical evidence, statistics about business partnerships across different countries and companies that is collected by a big consulting company. So to give kind of a more broader context in terms of what it means to build partnerships, not only my own experience. And so let's start with the definition. So the definition of partnerships that I'll be talking about is specifically equity partnerships. So that means people or shareholders in the company, they all have shares. Unlike, let's say you have, a partner that's a chain of stores and you sell your product through that chain, but they don't have shares. So that's a different topic. So with that, let's say there are four, categories of equity partnerships. Number one, co-founders. Probably the most important category. You have to get that right. My main co-founder in lending, in consumer finance, is Davis. I've talked a lot about that. I have made a whole separate video that you can find somewhere here about co-founder partnerships and the relationship side of partnerships there. And you can check it out. I have a co-founder for a real estate project. That's a different story, and I have a video about that also. So that's category number one. Another category is joint venture partners. So joint venture partners, those are partners, shareholders that bring complementary values. So let's say you want to enter a market or a product category, but you know nothing about it. You don't want to learn and build it in-house. You take a partner that is an expert, and that's how you do a partnership. An example of a joint venture partner is our Saudi Arabia investor family office that we're partnering with. We're going for a license in Saudi, and that partner is bringing local country expertise, connections and knowledge on the market, also a way to deal with the regulator, stuff that we don't have, and we bring to the table management experience in terms of building consumer lending businesses. So that's a joint venture. Let's say category number three, investors. Investors, VCs, strategic investors, seed investors, you name it. So from my experience, I've had VCs, I've had seed investors, the whole bunch, but the most important investor partnership category that I've experienced is a strategic investor. Capitec, the biggest retail bank from South Africa, they invested in my business Avafin back in 2018, became 40% shareholder in the company, and over a couple of years we were close partners, and then eventually they acquired the rest of the business. So that's an example there. And the last one, management partnerships. So let's say there's an investor, entrepreneur that wants to build a business, and they partner up with a group of people or one person, for example CEO, executive management that take shares in the company, and then they build the business. So an example of that, over the last 3-4 years, I've started lending businesses in places like Sri Lanka, Jordan, like I mentioned now, Saudi Arabia. Now looking to do that in the UAE with partnerships where there is one person or a few people that run the daily operations of the business. Me and my co-founder, we invest the equity capital, and then we're active non-executive board members, and that's how we scale the business. So we have a partnership between us as investors and a management team. So those are the different categories. Let me now talk about 10 or so learnings from my experience across these different categories over a 15-year time span. Playbook for partnerships. 5 different learnings I've had from doing partnerships across 15 years, different business models, different geographies. Number one question, hence is the first, is understanding and asking why is the other party and why am I going into this partnership? It's such a fundamental basic question, but it has to have a good answer. And it seems so no-brainer, so common sense, that it doesn't even warrant asking. But there are so many times, and I have this experience of seeing that it's not really clear, like, why is this other partner with me, and vice versa. And that creates a bit of friction, a bit of miscommunication, and also misalignment of expectations. So ask yourself, why am I getting into this partnership, and why the other party is getting into this partnership? And some good answers are, for example, number one, the easiest one, money. So somebody's bringing money, somebody's bringing in other resource. That's a very simple case. Some other examples is both parties are bringing specific resources. Let's say one is bringing product, the other one bringing clients. Let's say telcos that have tons of clients, a lot of consumers on their database, and they partner with fintechs who are very good with payments, who are very good with lending, and then they create these partnerships, e-wallets and a bunch of other things. That's a good example. Other examples, I mean, it can be market access. So let's say we are going into Saudi Arabia. It's a very closed market with specific regulation, and the law in itself doesn't allow you to do business unless you have a local shareholder. So that's a very evident, clear reason why you would do a partnership. And there are a million other formats and combinations where it makes sense. But ask yourself a very clear question, and it has to have a specific answer. The more specific, the better. And on top of that, do due diligence on the partner. Check if they really have the credentials. Check how they've done on other partnerships in the past. Check if they have the resources that they're saying that they're going to provide, either it's money or licenses or product know-how or people, etc. If those are multinational public companies, then it's one story. But if you're dealing with private, smaller entrepreneurs or companies, then make sure you do your due diligence. Number 2 lesson is commit from the very start of the partnership, right from the beginning, in terms of resources necessary. Because oftentimes when companies that get together, especially founders, they're excited, they want to do new things and chase new projects. It's like a bit like marriage, very exciting in the beginning, and once the initial romance kind of dies down, then the real everyday hustle and work kicks in. At that point, it's critical that you have the resources allocated, promised by each of the sides, whether it's money, importantly, decision-making resource. So on both sides, there are some decision makers about the joint venture, about the partnership. They need to have their time allocated and dedicated and committed to the partnership throughout the whole project. And that's super critical. And both sides have promised something, and they have to allocate that right from the beginning, because oftentimes joint ventures, partnerships, it's a side project. It's a side thing for one or the other parties or both parties. In the worst case scenario, this side project as a deliverable gets thrown onto a desk of some senior manager in one or the other organization. Worst yet, those senior managers don't get paid on the delivery of that partnership, and then that just gets stuck in a lingo amongst other projects, deliverables, etc., etc. So make sure that going into a partnership, there is a resource allocation and commitment from both sides right from the beginning, to not drop into the abyss. Number 3, have a shareholder agreement. for your venture, for your partnership. It's such a common basic thing that if you don't have a shareholders agreement into going into a partnership, then you're an idiot, you're wasting everybody's time and it's gonna fail. And by default, if you are doing partnerships, you are not a beginner in business, so you should have the understanding to have everything written on a piece of paper and agreed upon, but that's still critical, still very important. And it's important, of course, not only for the reasons that you might get into a dispute and then you go to court and then, you know, all that happens and you have to have documents in place. That is the least likely outcome, but still possible. The more likely outcome, or the more important reason why you need to have everything written on a piece of paper, is because very quickly both sides or either side can forget what did they promise, what was the objective, especially what resources each of the parties are bringing to the table. And that's just a practicality. You know, businesses have a lot of things going on, a lot of projects. Partnerships oftentimes are not the top core business priority. You know, did you promise $1 million investment in year 3? Or year 2? Is it in paid capital? Is it a loan? You know, are your senior managers going over to the other party to do training every month, or is it every quarter, etc.? So there's a million things that you need to make sure you write on a piece of paper so both sides don't forget. That's one. Also importantly, practically, is you start with a term sheet where you state the objective, the intended outcome of the partnership, you state who brings what value, and you state, you know, basic economic terms of the agreement. And that term sheet you can do basically overnight or in a couple of days, couple of weeks, as you are entering into the discussion about the partnership. And later shareholder agreement is based on that term sheet. So make sure the term sheet is there and the shareholder agreement builds from there. And the last thing, most importantly, governance. Governance, it's a fancy word, sounds very cool, but what it really means is have a clear understanding of who are the people involved in the decision making of this partnership, because there will be some people from one side and from the other. You can call it executive committee, board, whatever. It's the government structure, the people that are involved in decision making about the partnership. What decisions are they making? What veto rights each of the decision makers have? Things like that. Any lawyer will give you more detail about the governance, but governance is probably, I think it's super critical. Number 4, build trust early. And the word trust is probably something that's applicable to any relationship, but definitely in business partnerships it's critical. I could have started with that, but specifically with trust, there's a difference between holding back and being suspicious and trying to kind of slowly get there with trust and see what happens and let the other party deliver on trust and prove that they're trustworthy. Instead, you can build trust intentionally and purposefully by doing some specific actions. And those are, first and foremost, small, quick deliverables. When you're getting together, you figured out, you know, your term sheet, you know, you understand that there's allocation of resources from both sides, and then, you know, everyday work starts. Let's say you have to establish entities, you have to like do product design, whatever it is. Do small, quick deliverables where each side has the chance to show quick results. That's one. Second, regular communications in a form of weekly agenda calls, some other form of project management updates, right? Where you can speak about, okay, we've done this is what we're struggling with, etc., etc. Third, face-to-face meetings. This is super critical, especially in this fucking COVID, post-COVID era where everyone's online. Face-to-face meetings give you a chance of, you know, feeling out the other side, getting a sense of what's not really, you know, getting through, etc., etc. I mean, don't have to explain it, but it's super critical, especially in partnerships. And I guess the other piece I would say is explain your organization and explain how your organization functions, how it makes decisions, and what's important in your organization, right? We all take for granted that, you know, two parties get together. Oftentimes they come from different backgrounds, different businesses, and they don't necessarily understand each other, and they don't necessarily understand the details of what they're talking about, because both of the parties operate in their own environment with their own core business, and they think that everybody understands what they're doing. And we've seen it oftentimes, you know, we are in lending, in fintech, every day we're looking at, you know, provisions reports, we're looking at customer acquisition channels, all these things that I've done over a 10-year period, and then somebody comes from outside, they don't understand the fucking shit. All the abbreviations we're using, all these things that I, you know, for me comes as second nature, to an outside party, it all needs to be explained with context, and that explanation is on my shoulders to provide, and vice versa on the other side. So explaining how your organization functions, explaining your business more, explaining your principles and values. Let's say for me, I value much more speed than I value, let's say, cost efficiency. Yes, as an example. It could be completely different in another organization. So that's all important to talk about. Last one, number 5, advice is things will take more time and more effort. Anyway, so the point is, oftentimes administrative, bureaucratic things like setting up legal entity structures, opening bank accounts, funding the joint venture, all these things, they just take much more time than you anticipated, or maybe you didn't plan for it because there's regulation, there's cross-border issues, etc. And that can drag on for months before you get to, producing real value. So that's something to take into account when planning these things. Another thing, which is just simply always the case, is one side of the joint venture, of the partnership, will always deliver more, always provide more value than the other. And that is something that is very hard to account for, very hard to predict which one that side is going to be. But think about if you're in a partnership 2 years down the line, 12 months down the line, and you're the one that's delivering more than you think is promised and expected. How do you feel about that? That is something to keep in mind. If you're the one that's kind of more free riding and getting more advantage and benefit from the other side, I mean, you're good. But it could be you that is pushing the boat forward. So just think about how you're going to feel, and to make sure maybe that terms and conditions of your agreement is reflecting that. And the last point that I fell into the trap of as a young entrepreneur is when I meet this big investor, this big company, whatever, this rich guy, and they say, oh, we're going to give you the money, I'm going to open all the doors for you, like, come to my office 24/7, dude, I'm going to fly out and we're going to meet your team, etc., etc. And then like you get to work, you start, doing the business, delivering shit, and you understand the other party doesn't care about anything other than that minimum thing that has been agreed on and it has been put into the contract. If you agree to raise $1 million, that's all you're going to get. There's going to be no more open doors, support, mentoring, whatever the fuck other promises are given when there's this hype energy when new partnerships emerge, right? The reality of partnerships is when that hype is over, that romance is over, you're delivering on a daily basis and you need to keep allocating resources, pushing through issues. And then at that point, nobody wants to, get together more and do brainstorms and just provide all the value possible. So remember that, be realistic. All right, so those are the 5 lessons from partnerships. Hope you liked it. Let's move to the next part of the video. Okay, so in this last part of the video, I will talk about what Bain & Company says about partnerships. So they've looked at about 300 different companies across the world, different industries, and what are the key takeaways for reasons partnerships succeeded and failed. And like I mentioned, this is real statistics, empirical evidence. Bain & Company, obviously one of the biggest consulting companies in the world, very credible. And there's a nice website which has a concise results summary of that research report, and it's called Delivering Results in Joint Ventures and Alliances Requires a New Playbook. So this is what it's called, a new playbook. And what I would say is, most importantly, here it is, digging deeper, we see that the differences between the winners and losers rest on execution. Obviously, ideas cost nothing, it's all about execution. So clear value creation, economics and strategy are at the top and nearly equal contributors to success. According to our survey of 281 practitioners, and a lack of these dimensions contribute to failure. So yet the top reasons for failures are execution related, poor cultural fit, like I mentioned, a lack of strong senior management commitment. So this is what I wanted to kind of point out, the commitment. One of the points was really committing resources, committing time, decision makers, need to be involved from day one instead of just throwing that on somebody's desk. Execution is an ongoing process that requires upfront diligence and strong commitment over the lifetime of the partnership. Okay, having an effective partnership playbook can go a long way. Okay, so this is a graph that summarizes those 300 different partnerships. What worked, what didn't. So considering deals that met and exceeded expectations, what are the key reasons why they succeeded? Number 1, clear value creation, economics for all parties. So this goes back to the first point I mentioned, understanding why both parties are going into this partnership, having a very clear, simple answer, right? That's what effectively this confirms. Second, clear strategy and objectives, okay? This goes back to the same point. and having both parties being able to deliver complementary resources. On the other side, and then of course you have strong senior management commitment, like I mentioned, commitment, strong cultural fit, okay, that's what I mentioned, and so on and so forth. And on the other side, it's basically a mirroring situation in terms of why partnerships failed. Poor cultural fit and lack of trust. Again, I mentioned trust, very important. Let's work on intentionally delivering on trust. Lack of strong senior management commitment. Okay, you can have great companies, founders with amazing vision, shareholders agreement all in place, agreeing to deliver things, but then the real day-to-day people that will be responsible for the delivery are executive management or management people, right? If those are not committed, if their incentive structures are not set up right, i.e. they get paid for a successful partnership that launches the product in month 8, then you're fucked, you're screwed, it's never going to happen. That's what also Bain and company confirms. Now, if we keep scrolling, I guess this is one piece I wanted to highlight. Over-investing, creating the right governance structure and operating model. You see, this is what I mentioned in the shareholders agreement, I think. Make sure you have your executive committee, the few people that are responsible for the day-to-day decision making, reporting, getting partnerships operating model and governance right up front really matters. In an acquisition, the initial operating model can be adjusted. Partnerships, however, making changes to the operating model after signing often turns into difficult negotiations. So get that governance agreement right from the beginning. All right, so this another last point, I think, show commitment to lifetime management. Similar to any businesses, it's important to recognize that the future will usually be different from the planned intention in the beginning. Partnerships are likely to perform well on some dimensions and underperform on others as markets evolve. In short, in more blunt terms, one side will always do more and deliver more value than the other side, and that's just the reality, and you never know how it's going to turn out. Okay, I think that is pretty much it. A very brief summary from Bain and Capital to give you a bit of context and statistics on partnerships generally. Hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe, like, keep watching, comment, don't comment stupid shit, and I'll see you in the next one.